And we will now go to the first panel. So the first panel will be moderated by Martin, together with a couple of people you've already seen, but also new ones. And Martin, I'm searching you again. There you are. Perfect. You can please let us know what the topic is about the first panel and who will be joining us.
Yes, of course. Thank you, Sarah. In the first panel discussion, we will speak about the challenges in the Hyperloop ecosystem for passenger transportation. Milan, take your seat, please. You're the CEO of Nevomo.
Thank you.
And I'm sitting here. The next panelist is Diana Zhou. She is Senior Director and Global Alliances and Policy from Virgin Hyperloop. Warmly welcome. Please welcome Geuze. He's the CCO and co-founder from Hardt Hyperloop. Welcome, Mars. Please welcome Fabien, Letourneaux, R&D Program Manager, System Safety, SNCF. A warmly welcome. And a warmly welcome to Thomas Jarzombek, Commissioner of the Economic Affairs Ministry, BMWI, for the digital industry and startups. A warmly welcome. Last but not least, and digital panelist, Smit, Innovation Manager, NS. Can you hear us, Smith?
Loud and clear, Martin.
Great. So boarding completed. So let us start to speak about the challenges for the Hyperloop technology for passenger transportation. I heard that most of the showstoppers are the social acceptance and the regulations for a Hyperloop. Who wants to start with that topic? Mars, please.
I want to start. I think if you look at passenger transport, the things that you just mentioned, the public acceptance and the regulations are two of the most important aspects. There are many different ones, but public acceptance is one from various angles. One, you've got the people actually traveling with a Hyperloop. Two, you've got the shippers and the logistics providers who need to accept Hyperloop as a solution to also change their logistics systems to it. And the third is the residents living around a Hyperloop. And those are three different aspects that you all have to take into account in order to bring Hyperloop to reality. And you've always seen it in the introduction of all the other modalities that for people to accept a new modality, this is a new thing, right? It's something that you have to understand, and people are first scared about it. But I do think that the mindset is shifting a little bit in those aspects. There was recently a research in Germany, actually, a poll, where they looked at how willing people are to travel with a Hyperloop. And actually, a Hyperloop was already higher rated than, for example, autonomous cars. Well, you would expect that autonomous cars are closer to what we already know, right? Mm-hmm. So I do think the feeling that a Hyperloop has in terms of it's very similar to mass transport. I think that it actually makes it more accessible for people than some of the other upcoming modalities. So it is one that is, I think, solvable.
Thomas, you're a big fan of the Hyperloop technology, is it right?
That's obvious. And the picture was funny about the comparison of cars that we've seen before, the electric cars, autonomous cars, and so on. I wouldn't completely agree on that, because I believe the potential for autonomous cars is providing buses, smaller buses, and to go over the times where you wouldn't drive your car in person. But nevertheless, I believe we need huge transportation technologies for a lot of people, and that have to be reliable and flexible. And especially in comparison, what I already said at the opening, if you compare a Hyperloop to electric planes, which we are also fostering, I believe the big advantage of a Hyperloop could be that you can access it in a very short period of time, that you don't have to wait 2 hours or 3 hours until the next one comes. The question of security controls has not been raised today, but if it could go in a way that we see this at the traditional trains, that would be a huge advantage to start somewhere in the city, to have a frequency, a very short frequency, and to access it easily. And so I think that Hyperloop could be the most inspiring game changer technology. And yes, that's why we should foster this. And especially if you look at the German railroad system, there is a huge amount of money that has to be invested to make it up to the point. It's absolutely not reliable today. I think this is the biggest disadvantage of the traditional train system. If you could arrive in the times that are scheduled today, it would be better, or maybe an alternative to plane, but my personal experience is that very often this would not be reached because of the complexity, because of the legacy system, components which are 100 years old and older, and so on. And so maybe it's more interesting to make an update with this new technology than to invest a lot of money in an update of the old technology.
When I spoke with the German Ministry of Transportation, they told me we have already the best infrastructure network in Germany. Why we need an Hyperloop?
Yes. I believe in the past, I don't know how it is in other countries, but every time people in Germany say, so our infrastructure is so bad, and otherwhere it's so good. I mean, when I look to Mars, in Netherlands, you made really an update over the last 20 years. That's obvious, but if you travel to Silicon Valley and look how mobile phone infrastructure is going on there, how roads look like, it's obvious that there are a lot of places all over the world where the investments in infrastructure had not been sufficient over the last decades. And so I guess an update is absolutely necessary. And disruptive technologies will bring you to a new level. And I see a lot of people going by cars. So yesterday in the evening, I had a business meeting, and my partner said he was also going to Frankfurt today. And he said, so I will go by car. And I said, why do we go by car? And he says, yeah, I can make phone calls and so on, and it's more convenient for me. And that shows that we need game-changing technology to get the people out of the cars.
Thank you. Fabien, you are working for SNCF, and you was a supporter. You invested as SNCF manager 2016 a huge amount as one of the first railway operators in Virgin Hyperloop. Why you did it?
Thank you, Martin. You're perfectly right. We were one of the first investors in Hyperloop, a conventional company, I would say. We were very interested. As a railway company, we are not just a railway company. We are an operator of mobility, in fact. So we are interested in all the means of transport, which allows to move people, lots of people around Europe and also around the world. So that's part of our DNA also. Why we invested in Virgin Hyperloop? At first, because it's, let's say, it's to have, to better understand the technology, to say, to be able to understand when it will be ready, how it will work exactly, what is its main characteristics, the speed, the number of people you can move per hour, and also, of course, its weak point, because it has some weak points, at least at the moment, so it has to be still to be solved. How it could be, the interoperability, intermodality with the other means of transport, how it could where the station could be located near the city or inside the city, for instance. But so let's say have a better understanding of the Hyperloop technology. The second objective is also to be to be able to advise the national, the regional, and local French authorities, because we are a key player in mobility in France, and of course we are asked sometimes and quite frequently about the Hyperloop technology. Is it an alternative to high-speed line or not? How could it be implemented in France? So we have to provide relevant, precise, and updated answers to that questions. And more, let's say, for SNCF, it's also important because the way the Hyperloop concept is developing is amazing. So it's also important for us to understand how we could manage innovation, how we could how we could also, for conventional railway, maybe have the same way to develop prototypes, not to only do step by step and just by let's say just following documents that are existing, but just looking forward and developing other things. And last, maybe it's also an opportunity maybe to implement some new technologies in conventional railways. So you've seen the high-speed switching technology without any moving parts. So it's also a weak point in the conventional railway. So if we could also solve that issue for railways, it could help. So that's kind of example why we invested in Hyperloop. So lots of things, lots of good. Good opportunities to catch.
No, I understand. Great arguments. Thank you, Fabien. And NS, sorry, Smith, that you are sitting alone in the room downstairs, but you can come to us soon that we are all together.
I will do that, Martin. Don't worry about that. I recognize a lot of the arguments made just now. Look, NS is also a very old company, right? So we are over 180 years old with a lot of legacy issues. But when I raise the topic of Hyperloop within the company, it generates a lot of energy. Basically, what one colleague said to me is that if you would start all over, what would you do? That's basically the question that generates a lot of energy within our company. And we invested in Hardt Hyperloop, Mars, I know him, of course, back in 2016. And for us, similar reasons, but to better understand the technology, but also to give our colleagues an opportunity to understand better what kind of technology they use, how we can maybe cooperate and learn from each other in that sense. And maybe in the future, also looking how we can integrate an Hyperloop in our current system that we have in the Netherlands. We are part of the Hyperloop development program with a team of 15 colleagues with different disciplines to also support Hardt in, maybe how to build an operational concept with which Hyperloop in the future could actually transport people between countries and between Europe. So a variety of reasons involved. And as we go along, I can still feel the energy within the team. So that's really great. And moving forward.
Mars, on the other hand, what you are saying as a founder of Hardt Hyperloop from the startup perspective, was it a great success for you that NS invested in you, and how long was the party?
Yeah, I mean,
it's still going.
But you got to realize, NS was our first investor. So, some people think that there's a lot of pushback maybe from traditional industry, but the reality is that we exist because traditional industry, as a first investor, believed in the future and invested in it. So, yeah, we are here because the NS invested in us. So I'm still ecstatic about that cooperation. I think it will go on in the future for a very long time because I think also rail operators have a perfect positioning to in the future also, for example, be an operator for Hyperloop. I mean, what is a better view? If you talk about public acceptance, what is better as a passenger that you step into a Hyperloop that's familiar to you, right? If you step into an NS vehicle or in a SNCF vehicle or a Deutsche Bahn vehicle, that you recognize it, it makes it much more, close to what you already know. So definitely the collaboration will go on for a very long time.
Great. Diana, what was your position when SNCF invested in Virgin Hyperloop in 2016?
Yeah, and actually that was, I joined the company right after we closed our Series B round, which is when SNCF came in as an investor. And I have to say, that was part of the reason why I actually joined Virgin Hyperloop. I don't know if I've told anybody this, but I think when the likes of SNCF and others invested into the company, I think it made it a lot more real for a lot of people. I think it gave us all a signal that this is something that the rail industry is taking seriously. It must be something real, something concrete. And it's actually been a fantastic partnership for us for a couple of reasons. One is that Virgin Hyperloop as a company is full of really, really smart people, really, really smart rocket scientists, engineers, all different types of engineers. Our CEO actually used to work at SpaceX and at Virgin Galactic, so literally rocket scientists. But developing a technology, developing a rocket is very different from developing infrastructure. And we have a lot to learn from SNCF in that respect. We have a lot to learn in terms of developing infrastructure that is deployable for miles and miles of Hyperloop routes. We have a lot to learn in terms of how do we operate a system and maintain a system in a way that is cost effective and also that is very safe for passengers. These are very important topics and are not topics that should be taken lightly. And SNCF has many years of experience dealing with these exact type of topics. And so they have been a critical part of our technical advisory board over the last few years, advising us on these types of topics. And I think it's been extremely helpful for us as a company.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Milan, you became the CEO of Nivomo several days ago.
Yeah,
I think congratulations.
Basically. Thank you.
On your road, on
Thank
your
you.
track. What exactly you are doing at Nevomo? You are developing a macro technology. What exactly is it?
Well, it's basically what I described because we, of course, as I said, we are a Hyperloop company, but we were thinking about how to improve the existing legacy infrastructure because sometimes, even the companies, they face economic challenges, right? Because you build the technology, you have to depreciate it over time. So it's not really feasible, I would say, in some situations that you come to an infrastructure manager and tell him, okay, so we have come up with a great technology, even though it's true. You rip off what you have there, down there, right? And you put a tube there and let's start, right? So it means that they would have to close the operations for a couple of years and many different reasons. So of course there are technological things which make sense, we understand. But on the other hand, you have also economic challenges, right, for the infrastructure managers. So we have come up with a solution, as I described it, basically, with the linear motion and magnetic levitation, that we think is just ideal for these purposes. And that's it.
Here in Germany, we have almost 600 routes and tracks, which are waiting for the reactivation. So it would be a good starting point.
Well, this is maybe one of the, let's say, potential use cases that we are looking at, right? Because you have, of course, many different use cases, right? You have use cases where directly Hyperloop makes sense because you make a greenfield project. But as we say, for specific use cases, for specific, let's say, markets, it might make sense. That's all we do.
And all of the Hyperloop startups here on stage are working firstly for cargo and then passenger transportation, or both, or what is your priority list, Mars?
I think you have to do both at the same time. They both have their pros and cons. From a public acceptance angle, of course, it is attractive if you can run vehicles with packages or flowers or fresh vegetables first simply because from a risk perspective, that's less scary, especially if you have to invest hundreds of millions or billions of euros into an infrastructure. If you can minimize that risk somehow, that's of course very attractive. A difficulty with transporting cargo is that typically routes start making economically sense if you have a network. If you have lots of places that you can connect with each other, where you have, because warehouses typically source from a very broad range of locations and they bring stuff to many different locations. So, you know, from one perspective, you would like to start with cargo, but if you look at it completely from a business case side, you would probably have more chance with passengers, because there's lots of places where we're already developing infrastructure for improving passenger services. Speed is usually a higher factor for passengers. Of course, for e-commerce, it's also very important. So what we are doing is we're developing both at the same time. There is a very interesting route in the Netherlands where there's some direct hubs between which time-critical goods are being transported, where there's 30 stakeholders in the Netherlands, so the port, the airport, some of the biggest shippers, producers of flowers and so on, who are working together to see if that could be a first route. But almost all of the other projects in the world are more for passengers. So you have to do it both at the same time. And in the end, you want to have one infrastructure that can transport both systems. So yeah, it's parallel tracks, but it's very different stakeholder groups.
And what is your wish to Thomas and to the Ministry of Transportation at all? Diana and Mars.
Diana, go ahead.
What is our wish?
Yeah.
Certainly that we would like Hyperloop to be considered as one of the tools that you guys have at your disposal when you're looking at how to meet mobility and accessibility objectives. I think all we want is to have a level playing field between Hyperloop and other modes of transport. And that's a lot of what we've been advocating for with various government entities. We want Hyperloop to be treated similar to all the other modes of technology. And that includes a couple of things. One is understanding what is the regulatory pathway to getting safety approvals for Hyperloop for both passengers and, if needed, for cargo. Two is understanding what kinds of permits and approvals are needed. So this is a very big topic of conversations with a lot of the projects and various partners that I'm working with is, okay, so we have, let's say, a rail line, or we have this amount of land. If we're going to put a Hyperloop on it and operate it, what kinds of additional permits are needed in order to do that? And it's very unclear at this moment, but I think having that level of clarity will allow a lot of these project sponsors to move forward with these projects. So I think, the technology, I think it's on the private sector, it's on all of us as Hyperloop developers and Hyperloop companies to make sure that the technology is there, and to make sure that the technology is at a place where it can be implemented safely, it can be done in a way that's cost effective from both a construction perspective as well as from an operational perspective. But all we'd like is for planning authorities and ministries and departments of transportation to take Hyperloop seriously, because we think it is a very, very positive and has a lot of potential for the future of transportation. We want it to be taken seriously as a tool in the toolbox that you have to address all of the mobility challenges that you see today.
I have very little to add to this. I think one last thing to maybe then add, if you look at it more from a step back. Now we're asking a German ministry, but I think it's very important to also put it in European and global perspective. For example, from the European side, there's already various governments that are less or more involved in Hyperloop programs. And of course, the European Commission is already organizing a meeting with all the Hyperloop companies and the involved European agencies. And I think it's very important that there's a close collaboration between the European governments to also see how do we ensure that we're gonna realize one European Hyperloop system, and how do we also from the public sector take leadership in that to bring that all together. Because us private companies, we will push and we'll run and we'll raise more funding and do it from ourselves. And of course, we're working together already on how to standardize. But if there's also really a push from the public sector for that, I think that's very good for the longer term interoperability.
Yes, I believe interoperability is absolutely key, and I can tell a short story to that. Last time I went to Frankfurt, it was about 2 weeks ago. I was sitting in an ICE train, and somewhere beyond Cologne, he couldn't drive further, and it came from the Netherlands, from Amsterdam, and there were some things to do to switch it to the German railway system, and nobody in this train was exactly aware of how to do that, and then they tried to call the hotline, and the hotline was busy, and this was the reason why 800 passengers in this train had to wait. So this is reality today. We have such a fragmented infrastructure. I absolutely agree, we need a standard, but this is not something that only government can do. This is also a question for the industry. That's what we see in all other industries, in the IT industry, that standards are defined between companies, and I have no clue if the kind of tubes that are built by Virgin and the tubes that are used by Hardt, for instance, if they're physically interoperable and all the other specs. And I already written down the question of safety regulation. I guess also for safety regulation, it's necessary first to define a standard from the industry to come with ideas. So what could be helpful and what not. From the regulator's perspective, I believe, for being now a member of the Transportation Committee of the Bundestag for more than a decade, our main problem, and I believe it's not just a German problem, is to establish these tubes over 100 kilometers and more. Because that's the main problem to expand the traditional railway system. Because everywhere we want to build new railroads, people are against it, and the procedures take years and more decades than years to be serious. And I hope that with Hyperloop it would become easier to find acceptance because of the sound. That's the main problem that people have, that they say, so okay, first you come with these passenger trains, and second step will be that you have cargo trains, and they drive all the night through, and they're very loud, and we cannot sleep anymore. And I think this is the main reason why people are protesting against railroads. And it would be very helpful to get some real-life data about how noise of Hyperloop really would develop. And I think this is the main question when it comes to the acceptance.
Tis, what you say on your perspective?
I recognize a lot of things being said. Noise in the Netherlands, where it's very dense, is always an issue. I have a background in rail freight, and I recognize the discussion. It was never over. And it is for a foreseeable future won't be over yet. But these are learnings we have to take into Hyperloop as well. So we do a lot of things at the same time. What I'm very positive about is that we hold each other's hand in this regard. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg discussion sometimes, but what really helps is that we make steps and make things visible. So when we have results, we know a bit better of what we can do and what will be the logical next steps. To share this kind of information is to get this whole Hyperloop motion getting forward within Europe and the rest of the world. So it's exactly that. So I'm very happy to hear that on a political level, on a public level, on a private sector level, these kind of initiatives are rolling. But this is something we're in for the long haul. So we have to accept failure. We have to accept that things won't go as smooth as possible. But if we want to win the public opinion, every now and then you have to show what has been established and has been found already, and then move forward.
Mm.
Yeah, well, this is exactly our approach. So I have also nothing to add, but you know, basically doing a revolution is always more difficult than going in the evolutionary way. So that's why we invented Macrail, and that's basically how we perceive it as well. So, you know, I think that as we were saying, Hyperloop is the ultimate solution. We understand it. For different use cases, it might make sense to make a bypass, and do it via MagRail. In some situations, it makes sense to go directly towards Hyperloop. That's as it is. Yeah.
Fabien, what is the next step for your cooperation way forward? You're going together with Virgin Hyperloop. What you are working on right now, is it a social acceptance, or what you're doing exactly right now in your cooperation program?
With Virgin Hyperloop, the last months we worked on the reliability, availability, maintainability, safety, as Diana already said. So it's our core expertise as operator, so we bring them this kind of expertise. And in the future, maybe we could also talk with them about passenger experience, human factors. We already told them, but it was some years ago, that it's very important. Even if it's automated, it's autonomous, there's still someone who should monitor, who should supervise, and then the staff should be trained. So you have some issues related to that. So this is very important. And of course, the passenger will also have to be handled in a way. And I know that Sarah is there, Sarah Quick. So she's very aware of that. There's a masterclass on it. So it's very. I think it's not solved at the moment. It should be taken very carefully, and then so to me that's a good direction that we could work on together.
Right. I think there's maybe one more issue that I would like to add. I think we saw it in the Zelleros presentation, right? And there was a 10T network throughout Europe, the Hyperloop one. I think that if we are talking about interoperability, we're not talking about interoperability like among countries only. But we should also have the pods and vehicles interoperable between the conventional railway, because they will not disappear, right? Hyperloop is not going to be everywhere, right? So I think even this interoperability is important, to be able to come out of a tube, let's say, and put the pod on the railway infrastructure and then go to, let's say, some little or smaller town, right? So these are all the issues that we are going to face, and this is also basically not only the technical issue, but also regulatory issue, standards, etc., etc. But I think the environment is very complex, right? So this is not like black and white. I think there are many shades of gray, and this is what we have to take into consideration.
Are you saying that to have have it be interoperable between a train and a Hyperloop system?
Yeah, in a way, I think you have to consider it. Yeah.
I mean, I personally think that's going to be very difficult to do.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult, but it's not impossible, right?
I would say it makes it difficult in such a way that it becomes impossible. Because I think the main point here would be intermodality, right? Mm-hmm. That you integrate it so well with the other systems that it becomes a seamless transfer. But all the issues that you introduce by needing to put a Hyperloop vehicle also on rail, and all the extra, once a Hyperloop vehicle has been on a rail, you've lost your track of it, and it becomes a danger when you put it into the Hyperloop again. So I would say, just from a standpoint of keeping the simple system and safe, I would say we should keep it at intermodality.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different definitions of interoperability, right? Some definitions are you have the same pod or different pods on the same track. Others may be that you have different types of pods or rail vehicles on the same track as well. So, or you can also have a definition of interoperability where it's a seamless connection between Hyperloop and rail and buses and cars, and all of that is integrated in a way at a station where the connections are very seamless. So that's another type that's probably more around intermodality than interoperability, right? So there are different stages of interoperability, and I think we just need to figure out as a group which one makes the most sense for all of us. Yeah. And that's actually very difficult. That's not a very trivial thing to agree on. That's actually very, very difficult.
Yeah, thank you, Diana, for a specification. That's exactly what I was talking about when I was saying shades of gray, right? So there are many, many different scenarios. So whatever you call it, interoperability, intermodality, we need to make an consensus on that. So thank you.
I got a question from the audience. How you consider midterm evolution to a sustainable aviation with fuel cell and electric aircraft a threat for Hyperloop business model?
Yeah.
Wow.
Capacity is an issue. That's the first thing. Just look at a few of the biggest European air hubs, say Heathrow. They're at full capacity. If they need to expand, they're now looking at an extra runway of 18 billion euros. But they actually think it's going to be 36 billion. If we would have to expand Schiphol Airport, for example, there's also no space. We would have to move to sea. There's lots of different complexities. Capacity is going to be a massive issue. So that would be my first answer. Even if you electrify aviation fully, you're not going to have the capacity to cope with the massive growth that is projected. Hyperloop is actually a very cost-effective way to increase that capacity, because if you remove, you can remove about 70% of the European flights, and then you save all of the capacity. And then you've got more space for also aviation. So, you just get different roles. So I would say that Hyperloop is more like an additional mode. Aviation will improve and it will fulfill their niche. Hyperloop will also take a role in that and play its own niche. And the same for rail, right? There's many functions of rail that Hyperloop could never fulfill. So every modality will improve. But we will also know that not everything can be solved with only improving the existing modalities.
So maybe I can tell something about the projects we are doing when it comes to electric flights. So we are supporting a project that's from an American company, from Sierra Nevada Corporation. They go to an old facility here from Dornier, and they take an existing turboprop plane. It's a DO328. It has a capacity of around 40 passengers in the traditional way. When it will start electric, maybe they can achieve 50. And we're supporting the whole electrification of aviation with additional 200 million euros over the next years. And the aim is to have this regional plane for short distances, especially domestic flights. And but I guess the range can be extended over the time of even more than 1,000 kilometers. But in the beginning, I guess we're talking more about domestic flights. The interesting thing about the electric planes is that you don't have to fill the huge single aisle from Airbus with 200 passengers and more. This is the reason why we see today aviation traffic mostly from these huge hubs. And if you look at Germany, these are mostly 5 to 7 airports where nearly all domestic flights are going around. And so it's a hurdle for a lot of people because they first have to travel to one of these hubs. And with these smaller regional planes, it could be possible also to reactivate more regional airports so that you have a more decentralized infrastructure. We have, in the end, 400 airports in Germany, which are partly very, very tiny, and a lot of them wouldn't be viable for these regional flights. But the interesting thing, and also to bring capacity into the market, would to expand the number of airports, and it would make economic sense with the small planes, also with smaller airports. And don't forget eVTOLs. eVTOLs are emerging very fast, and I believe an eVTOL in Europe, or especially also in Germany, wouldn't be a technology to move inside a city, but it's a way to move from the region to the city and back for distance of maybe 40, 50, 60 kilometers. And this could also be game-changing starting somewhere in 2025. In the end, I believe competition is always good for innovation, and I don't see any problem. Today you have planes, you have cars, you have trains, and in the future it will be the same. I'm pretty convinced.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. It's going to be it's going to come down to capacity. I mean, our system can handle tens of thousands of passengers per hour per direction, I find it very difficult to find a type of electric plane that will be able to handle the same kinds of capacities. So as people expect people and cargo to move faster and be able to get to places sooner and in an on-demand manner, I think it's going to be really difficult in order to meet those kinds of throughput needs. I think the other question is always going to come down to cost. I mean, how much is it going to cost to take one of these electric flights? We don't know. I mean, I think the cost is going to be a big driving factor of whether or not there is going to be acceptance of electric flights. And at the end of the day, I think people think that, oh, with Hyperloop there is, you're building a tube, it's new infrastructure, but with aircraft and electric aircraft, even if it's the redevelopment of regional airports that already exist, there is always going to be investment that's going to be needed in order to enable that kind of mobility. So I think capacity and throughput, the cost, and ultimately the investment into infrastructure are going to be some of the driving forces of how people view Hyperloop versus electric aircraft.
I got the next question from the audience. Investors' funding of Hyperloop companies seems to relatively low in comparison to other digital ventures. Why is this the case, and what is needed to increase funds? 4 minutes left, and I need also your closing words, because I'm the time boxer.
It's a typical deep tech problem we maybe have in Europe.
Exactly. And this is, if I may add just one little comment, still investors are somehow charmed, by software, right? But any software needs to run on hardware. And that's what we are saying we are doing. So we are fully convinced that deep tech is going to be the next wave of investments. It's going to be the next kind of target. And yeah, we're waiting for that. So we have some good future, I think, ahead of us.
Yeah. I mean, we have raised over 500 million in investment so far. So we think that's quite a substantial amount. Of course, we always welcome more. So if anybody would like to invest, please come talk to me afterwards. But but seriously, I think you're right, Milan. People look at software, they think it's really cool, it's really sexy. You have very low marginal costs to scale. It's a question of growth, and so it's just difficult getting past that mindset for investors. And I think, we've got to change that. We're building new technologies, new infrastructure for the future. And if you want to make a big impact, not make another fancy app, this is the way we've got to go.
And also, this is a problem of competition because to make another app, it's basically very simple, right?
The barriers to entry are very low.
Yeah. What we are guys doing here is something that is really, let's say we have good, when you take into consideration Porter's 5 forces, right? We are well positioned because the entry barriers are quite high, I would say.
Well, that's what we're heading for with our new deep tech fund from the German government, to make a little bit promotion for that, because we're going to invest especially in cases like this. And we see similar amounts when you look at nuclear fusion or quantum computing. All these startups are pretty low in investments right now.
Yep. So the time is almost over, but we have enough time to follow up. We have great masterclasses, more interactively. So everybody can give to the audience 1 or 2 sentences, closing words. We start with NS, Thijs Smit, please.
Yeah, so what takes me away hearing all of this is that we are in such a great environment with very basically future development. And personally, I'm fairly energized to be involved in this, although it's a very small margin. But my words to you would be to just keep pushing forward. And it's just so cool to do it together. And hopefully we can show some results very soon, building up on what we already have done. So all the best to you.
Thank you. Milan.
Okay. I would like to maybe follow up on you guys, because you invested into Hardt, SNCF invested into Virgin Hyperloop. We also have our cooperation with Rete Ferroviaria Italiana, so if you want to know more about it, you were invited to the masterclass, as I was talking about, and also to the CapEx-OpEx comparison, which might be an interesting source of information for you guys to understand a little bit the positioning. Thank you.
Thank you. Diana?
Well, I think we've covered a lot of really interesting topics today. All of these are very important to the development of the Hyperloop industry, from things like what kind of support are we looking for from various governments, to safety, to operational, to new types of modes such as electric aircraft. And all of these are, this is just the starting point, though. I mean, the technology has come a really, really long way since the industry first started in 2013, 2014. But really, this is just the beginning, and we really need all the support that we can get from everyone in order to progress this further. I think it is a super exciting place to be right now. There is a lot more to come. This really is, I believe, the decade of Hyperloop, where we can take this technology and put it into the market and see how people use it and deploy this in a real-world setting. So I'm really excited to be here today. I look forward to having conversations with all of you guys about how we can make this happen.
Thank you.
If you look at generally the time to develop a completely new airplane or something, it's typically about 20 years or so. The big what was the one that went supersonic again?
Concorde?
Concorde, exactly. It was about 20 years development time.
Yep.
But the Hyperloop paper came out in 2013. We're about 8 years further now. And I think if you look at where we've gotten, right, all the tests that have already been done and all the programs that people have, the test facilities that are coming, I think we're very much on track. And I think we're going to be a little faster than the general processes. So very much looking forward, if we're talking about passenger challenges, to having the first passengers really traveling in a Hyperloop this decade.
Great. Fabien?
I would like to say that the Hyperloop technology is a very promising technology, but it still has to reach some critical milestone before it becomes an operated system of transport. But so it will take years, as you all said. What I maybe would like to emphasize is that the ecosystem should structure itself to be more mature in order to maybe to converge towards the same or same technology or same architecture, so that finally we could build a network and to have more a network than just prototypes or single lines, which are no future in a way. So, yeah, structure the ecosystem, and like standardization, for instance, is one way. Regulation, but yes, I think that promoters, Hyperloop promoters, have also have a future in their hands to if they want to succeed.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Thomas.
So I'm pretty bullish when it comes to Hyperloop, because we see a lot of ingredients which are necessary for fast innovation, and that means there is strong competition with startups, and there's a lot of venture capital in that, and all this is making things much more agile, as if Deutsche Bahn or others would develop that. And so this is on the right track. I believe from the government side there are two things necessary. I think we need a perspective for an infrastructure, because I believe this cannot be provided by only private deals, and the second thing is to start to be an anchor customer, because I believe all these VC-founded companies cannot 10 years survive without getting any procurements from governments or from the big railroad operators, and that's what's necessary.
Many thanks for your time. Also, I would love to follow up, and we will follow up in the master classes. Many thanks to you, panelists and partners. And I see you in several minutes in the masterclass sessions. Thanks for your time and for your patience. Thank you.